I don't know what another word for ultimate is, but this is ultimate options, and it is ultimate. It's awesome.
Epic options, maybe?
It's epic options. It's ultimate. It's epic. What's the opposite of ultimate? Proximate? I don't know.
Yeah.
Distant? I don't know. Ultimate? This is so much fun to have you with Corey and I. And we just every we had fun collaborating on how we should do the order of these. And I'll just say it again with the Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off. You did a great job on the Greeks, hopefully, and you did it the way where you practice in between and you felt the depth that's different by actually doing some stuff in between and digesting and growing a 1 week tree ring, if you will, rather than just blowing through all of these like in this marathon. When I did the 4 pillars, I released them all at the same time. I had people email me like they would purchase the 4 pillars on one day and the next day they said, dude, awesome. I'm like, are you kidding? 14 hours? How'd you digest that? I couldn't do that. And as Corey and I thought about putting this together, we thought, wouldn't it be better to know what Greeks are before you made your first trade? And wouldn't it be better to know, what I did the wrong one, dude. I want risk graphs. I want option chains. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
I want option chains, not risk graphs. Okay, here we go. Option chains.
Should I stop the recording or not worry about it?
I'll just edit it. We're in sync, so it doesn't matter.
Perfect.
It's time for ultimate options. It's not beginning options. It's not like get her started. This is the ultimate options class with Corey Halliday, the ultimate risk manager. And it's just good to have Corey here, and it's good to have you with the two of us. It's fantastic. So congratulations on getting through your Greeks. Hopefully you've got a good handle on your Greeks now. And hopefully you did it the right way, instead of just cranking them off. You did what we asked you to do, and you really did wax on, wax off. There's the instructional part of wax on, wax off, which means make a circle, breathe in, breathe out. Don't forget to breathe, very important, But then there's the actual doing like 5 cars. He didn't say wax on, wax off. Here's how you do it. Now let's move on to paint and fence. No, he actually had him practice. So hopefully you felt a depth and familiarity and just some seasoning and some digestion in the Greeks and watching them on some, paper trades you could have chosen for a week on some different options to buy or sell, puts or calls. And now we're going to get into the option chains. And we're just going to give an overview of option chains because there's a lot of different types. Of course, there's risk involved. That. And this is for grown-ups. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to help you learn more, as is Corey. So, what do we want to know about an option? I'll tell you, as technology grows, it's kind of like my freaking phone, Corey. I mean, my phone, it shouldn't even be called a phone anymore because talking on the phone's like 0.1% of what that thing does now.
Yeah.
I trade stock on my phone. I take pictures with my phone. I record stuff with my phone. I find restaurants on my phone. My phone tells me how to drive now. And I don't know, it doesn't always work well, but it tells me how to drive now. I mean, my phone is like, how many apps are there? There's one button that says, boom, make a call, and like 6,000 buttons that do something other than make the call. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. It used to be more money, more problems. Now it's more features, more problems.
Yeah,
right?
And it's just like Apple comes out with the iPhone 35 or whichever one they're on right now, and now you can look at it and a little mouse cartoon will mimic your facial features. I'm like, well, that's nice. I'm glad you guys spent $100 million to get it to do that, and so there's some features on my phone that they're cute and as technology grows, it seems like, I remember WordPerfect word processing, and, we've come a long way in word processing, but really in WordPerfect, you could cut, you could paste, you could spell check, which I really need all the time. The thesaurus in that thing. I mean, the features in like Microsoft Word and Pages now are cool, but essentially the stuff I do every day, I'll bet I don't use most of the new features in that stuff because it's really hard to come up with some. And so to compete, technology comes up with, new equals better or addition or more equals better. I don't know. I found that when I want to trade an option, if I can get these 8 things, then I feel pretty good. Now, you can find other stuff on an option chain than these 8. There's option chains that'll show you the intrinsic value of the option and the intrinsic value, so you don't have to do the math anymore in your head. Which, okay, maybe that's a cool thing. You have some that'll show you an implied volatility number, but, you got Vega. So you have some that will say, well, here's the probability of expiring out of the money or in the money. And, you can kind of see that maybe with your delta with a poor man's view. So more features, more benefits. I don't know if more features are, what are those benefits? My feeling is, Corey, that as you shop around for software and you decide what use, if you got these 8, I'm not saying, well, you're done, but I'm saying if you got these 8, I think they can keep you out of trouble. I think you have the information you need to make some good decisions, particularly with the ones we're going to add. Now, in the 4 pillars of investing, we talked about premium. We talked about strike price, expiration date. We might have touched lightly on open interest and volume. We didn't touch the Greeks because that's an extremely beginner course, and everyone's supposed to keep it on paper there. Here, still keep it on paper, but we're going to enhance this. And, you get these 8, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and we joke about a lot of features, but really it's the great equalizer because it used to be that only the professionals had this kind of data, and now it's readily available at a variety of different brokerages where everyone can get this data. Now, most people don't know to even look it up, and they try to trade options without it, which seems crazy to me, but it's available to you. So regardless of the broker you use, when you think about how far technology's come, it does get a little overwhelming sometimes to think about that. But the beauty of options is this isn't changing. It's not like they're changing new things that we need to add to our options. This is it. It's delta, it's theta, it's vega. So as you learn this and as you have access to that information, it's always going to be that way, right? Yeah. And so, the technology, the way we consume it and the way we look at it and so forth, that might change. I worked, so I'll give you a little background. When I was in college, I worked for Palm Pilot, and this was before they created...
Go short.
This was before they had the Trio. If you remember the Trio, that was kind of the original iPhone where it started to have email and stock quotes and different things. So I worked with them before that. And I was there as they were starting to kind of roll these ideas out. And so, technology's come a long way. I remember being in meetings and they were discussing getting stock quotes on your phone. And we all thought, this is revolutionary. This is going to change. And sure enough, it did. It's just that Palm wasn't the beneficiary of all that.
That's called obsolescence risk for sure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
WordPerfect, Lotus 1, 2, 3, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So you're going to get an option chain. What is an option chain? I'm hoping you know this, but we'll put it in there just in case. It's a table of information, very important information on options. And, here's one from a company called Thinkorswim, and, it has our strike price, as our expiration, it has our bid and our ask, the last price. We don't have the mark listed on this one. We could certainly put it on. Or this is not from Thinkorswim, actually. This is from a different software program. I'm sorry. This is from Tom Joseph, my good friend in Chicago. So this is different. But, it's the probability of breaking even, the probability of expiring in the money. Here's our theta data, vega. Do I need gamma on here? This one has it, delta. But we could put more on here. You can click a little settings button and, put more on here. But you can use Thinkorswim and all this. And I'm just going to go back quickly to the analogy I love when people are freaking out about software of, when you're test driving a truck, maybe you drive a Ford and a Chevy and you test them both out. You'll find both of them have a pedal you can push to make you go faster. Both of them have 4 wheels. Both of them have a way to stop. Both have a way to turn left and right. Both of them have a little thing you can grab to make it go forward or backward. And, if you got those, pretty much if you can learn how to use those, you can drive. Now, they'll also have a turn signal, but nobody really uses those where I live, at least not in my neighborhood. So, maybe a turn signal is optional for some people. I like it when they're courtesy and they use it. Ford doesn't have the Ranger anymore. So if you want a compact truck, sorry. But, to get to A to B, you can drive a big truck. Now I can't go down, but most people can go up. And so, there you have it. And, what's funny, Corey, is people make such a big deal out of this. If you're a Ford guy, you will get a pitchfork and a torch and go to the Chevy guy and fight him, and he's waiting for you with a baseball bat to go rumble. I mean, this is West Side Story right here. And they're like, what if I say what's the opposite of a Ford? Someone will say Chevy, right? As if the equipment was as different as man and woman, right? Or good and bad. And so, don't get caught up in that with software. Look, when you're shopping for software, I'll give you an example. I want both calls and puts. Check. Information same. I want strike prices. Check. Information same. Bid ask last, maybe a mark. Same. Implied volatility, maybe is on there. They both have it. Do I need that? Yeah, maybe. Expiration month, definitely need. Greeks, these guys have it. These guys don't. Okay, I just took Yahoo off my list. This is free. This costs nothing if you have money with a brokerage account, which means it kind of costs something, but it doesn't. Free when you open a brokerage account? I don't know how you say it, but whether you use Thinkorswim or Options Express or Options House or Fidelity or, the other 8 million that they advertise on CNBC every day, you want to get those 8 that we talked about at a minimum, I think. You want to get these 8 right here. And then after that, if you have some features you like. Another thing is maybe the display is different in the Chevy. You like the way the display lights up. Certainly I like Thinkorswim's organization much better. They have the calls on one side and the puts on the other. Yahoo Finance has the calls on the top, and then you got to scroll down and find puts. I like looking at them side by side. Information's the same. I just think Thinkorswim has organized their information better. For me, some people, it's in the eye of the beholder. Some people say, no, I like having it top and bottom. It doesn't cramp my screen as much. I'd rather scroll than have, little tiny numbers. So what do you want to say just briefly about not freaking out? You can test drive, and if you find something better, you can switch. It's not like this is getting married. You can, get any option chain you want, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And opening up a brokerage account is basically opening up a bank account. So you have to figure out whether they're available in your area. For U.S.-based individuals, there are a lot of brokerage choices. If you're international, then you have fewer choices. You can look for brokerages in your area that might trade your markets. So if you're in Australia, you might have brokerages that trade in Australia, or you can potentially go with more of an international broker, like we talk about. Interactive Brokers, who's a broker that I use. They operate internationally and so forth. So it really, we don't have any dog in the fight. We don't care who you use. What we want to make sure is you have the information, you have the comfortability, you like how it works, the expenses are not too high, your trading commissions and so on. So just ask a few of those questions. As long as it fits what you're looking for, you're comfortable with it, that's a great choice.
Saying the best brokerage and the best software is the same as saying, Toyota's the best. Well, you know what? Some people think Ferrari's the best. Well, no, that's too expensive for me and I don't fit. Or someone says that maybe. I don't know. But it really is in the eye of the beholder. And obviously different brokerages cater to different types of traders and sizes and frequencies, and they're gonna get features and benefits for a plethora of tastes. But the idea here is after this segment on option chains, my aim and your aim should be that I can look at those 8 basic components on an option chain, and those numbers will have meaning. When someone first starts looking at this stuff, this can be rather daunting. But really, you know what a call is, and you know what a put is. That has meaning to you now, right? Theta. Oh, I see. In 1 day, this is 5 cents, right? Oh, Vega. 1% change in volatility, 23 cents. Oh, okay, Delta. $1 move, 50 cents, maybe 51 cents if we round it up. Oh, Gamma. Let's see what Gamma says. Oh, Gamma. First dollar move, 50. Next dollar move up, 656, right? Or whatever. That'd be whatever it is.
Yeah, add the 5 cents to it. Yeah.
So you'd add this 5 cents to the 50, so it'd be 55 cents or whatever it is, right? Which is about where, it is right here. So I don't know that you really need Gamma. You take 56.20 minus 50, then you probably got it anyway. But we'll talk about the bid and the ask. We should understand the strike. We should understand most of the stuff. So the ones we haven't covered of those 8 are volume and open interest. It's usually abbreviated OI. And this is a wonderful opportunity when we talk about open interest to really talk about, stocks and options. Now, let's talk about the birth of a stock quick, just in case anyone doesn't know, is we have YCA Company Incorporated. And YCA Company stands for you, Corey, and Andy. So welcome to our company, Incorporated.
I was hoping it would be YMCA and we could break out in song.
I was going to say, you know how I sing, so we'll spare everyone that. The humor's bad enough, okay? The jokes are bad. When I tell a joke, you can hear a mouse pee on a cotton ball. But when I sing, the room clears out, okay? And the dogs begin to howl. So, so that's that. So when we start this company, it would be a private company, okay? It'd be a private company. And we would get what's called articles of organization. And we would create some bylaws to start our little, incorporation. We'd have these documents. And one of the things that needs to be in the articles of corporation, the bylaws, is the ownership. Okay, the ownership. And let's say we're partners, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We'll make Corey the president, so he'll get a little extra share here. And we'll say, look, we're going to do it 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So what we might do is say, we're going to start this company with 999 shares of stock. Okay, let's just do this. Let's do 1,000 shares. And let's give you 333 and me 333, and we'll give Corey 334 as our president. The bylaws said we got to have someone to lead us. So if there's a 3-way tie, Corey can be the tiebreaker because he's smarter of the 3 of us. And we'd have these shares. Something like that. Or maybe it's, 10,000 shares and 330 and 3, whatever, right? Whatever number. And there you go. We're private. And we start, making some money and we start growing. And all of a sudden we have a little jack in the box of a company right here that when you turn the crank, it makes a lot of cash. And if I had a jack in the box that if you turn the crank, you create cash, people want to buy machines like that. So you could look at a company as just a machine that cranks out cash. So if all of a sudden we have a machine that's cranking out millions and millions and millions of dollars, people say, I would like to buy. And a guy like Warren Buffett thinks this way. He goes, hey, there's a machine. There's a company that was started privately in Syracuse, Utah, that's now throughout the Intermountain West called R.C. Willey. They're a furniture company. And they were very smart. They didn't try to make any money on furniture. They made their money in banking. In other words, they became a lending institution. So if you came in there and you bought that furniture cash, you got it pretty much at their cost. And that's pretty cheap. And so they really didn't make hardly any money on furniture on cash. But the other thing they do is they'd offer you financing. They give you the same good price, but they'd offer you financing at 27%. And they became next to there was First Security Bank of Utah, R.C. Willey was second, and Zions Bank was third. And if you've traded at all, you know Zions Bank ain't small. They had First Security was first. R.C. Willey's the second largest lender in the state of Utah. And so they were cranking out cash because they really weren't a furniture company. Kind of like McDonald's really isn't a hamburger business. McDonald's is a real estate business. They own the best corners everywhere in the United States. They own the best real estate. They're a real estate business. They're way smart with how they buy their real estate. Well, here, R.C. Willey's was really just a lending institution. They were loan sharks. They made tons of cash. So Buffett looks at this and he says, I'll buy that. And so Buffett buys it. So there's a market for companies. So maybe we become successful and, we're making whatever we make and all this money's coming out. And there's two ways we could do it. We could sell it to Buffett privately and just sell him, a bunch of our shares privately. Or we could open this up and say, hey, let's go public with this. Let's go to the public and let's look at the, New York Stock Exchange here. And let's get some underwriters, a bunch of guys in suits over here. Let's get a bunch of underwriters together, and let's dilute these shares up. This company's worth, we're worth $1 billion now. 1,000 shares, $1 billion. It's $1 million a share. We don't need to charge $1 million a share. We could dilute this into, let's say, 10 million shares now. And maybe we'll each keep a bunch, maybe we'll keep like 3 million shares, 3 million shares for ourselves. Maybe we do 100, maybe we're a $10 billion company. We do 100 million shares at start. We keep 30 million for ourselves, 10 million apiece. So we've diluted our shares down and, to whatever price they are. And we take the 30 million and we keep them for us, for Andy, you, and Corey. And then we give the others we put this 70 million shares out here to the public, and that's called the float. So all of a sudden, 100 shares of stock are born. They're just created out of cutting a pizza up that got big. Here the pizza was small, now the pizza was big. Here the pizza was cut into 1,000 pieces. Now the pizza's cut into literally 100 million pieces. Literally shared and divided, not figuratively. It's literally divided up. And so we would just keep these for ourselves, and then you have the float. So after this initial public offering, now it's at $10 a share, let's say. And if people buy it more than sell it, it might rise to $15 a share. If you do really well, you become Amazon.com. Okay. If you don't do really well, you become Enron, or WordPerfect, or, WorldCom, or whatever, Hostess.
Or Palm.
Yeah, or Palm. Or Palm. And so as this drives up, we still have some shares. It enriches us. We don't have to do any work anymore. We've kind of sold this off. The board of directors runs it now. We hire a CEO to run it. We go off and retire. That is the best way to get rich in the world, is to do an initial public offering, because, let's say it's $10 a share, $100 million, that's $1 billion. $100 a share is $10 billion. So, that'd be $700 million we'd collect off that initial public offering. And then after that, the public just trades it back and forth between each other, and the price goes up, supply and demand. So it's kind of retail now. That's called the float. So that's how stock comes into existence in a big messy board. So there you go. Now,
and you can understand that from the business owner standpoint. They have all their eggs in one basket. So you, me, Andy, we're all invested in this, and we say, you know what? We want to move on. We want to diversify. We want to keep some ownership because this is our baby and we started the business, but we're going to sell off the rest of this ownership, and the public wants it because it's a great business that's generating profits and so on. And so we essentially are able to cash out and reinvest other places and do other things with our lives. And, that makes sense.
Probably the biggest reason to go public is just to raise capital, because a business's value creates a lot of equity. And if you are a real estate investor, there's something called a cap rate. And it's really, it's like price and earnings. How much will you pay for a jack-in-the-box that makes a lot of money? Well, if someone's willing to pay a lot for that jack-in-the-box, you've just created equity out of nothing. Think about that for a minute. You've just created equity or value out of nothing. The fact that it generates a lot of cash, you now have a jack-in-the-box that's worth something in and of itself, right? It's not just the products you sell. You have a jack-in-the-box that makes money. Well, if you can sell that jack-in-the-box off in pieces for huge amounts of cash, you can raise a lot of cash. Well, you can do that for three things. You could pay off debt. Okay, probably the most important reason I think to do it would be to grow, because if you have a good idea like Microsoft, but it's new and everybody, there's like 10 different guys that want to be the Microsoft, go public, raise capital, and now you're big, and you can market, and you can sue people, and you can get a team of attorneys, and you can defend your brand, and you can build your brand. You can spend money to establish yourself and grow. You can build more computers. You can buy a factory. You can add another, 1,000 workers. You can do all this stuff by raising capital. And then the third reason that you do it is to cash out and be done, which would be, personally a wonderful reason to go public. So that's stock. Okay, now that we got that covered, we know how stock works. Well, a lot of people don't know, how does an option get created? Okay, stock's easy. You go public, you start with a private, you got some shares, go public, dilute shares, get an underwriter, throw the float out there, let it trade, in a nutshell. That's oversimplified, but that's it. Corey, how in the heck is an option born?
Yeah, so very different scenario. With stock, we have what's called shares outstanding. When you buy or sell shares, the only way you can buy or sell is to have somebody on the other side of those shares, right? So if I want to buy stock, I have to buy it from somebody that already owns it. But with options, it's interesting in that we can create a new contract with our order. So there's not a set number. There's as many option contracts as people want to trade.
Now this is really important. And just briefly, just because we want to be comprehensive, what is the float?
Yeah, so when you have shares outstanding, basically it's the quantity of shares that are out there. The float is what's readily available to trade.
Right.
So that could be different than shares outstanding in that you have a fixed number of shares, but not all of them are trading. For example, if a company does a share buyback, they'll buy back their shares out of the market.
Kind of like basically the Fed tries to do that with cash, right?
Yeah, and so they'll set them aside. Other companies, to raise capital, could come out and do a secondary offering. So this isn't the initial public offering. This is a secondary offering where they come out and they say, we need to raise capital. We're going to sell more shares into the market, and we're going to raise funds, and people buy those shares. That's a secondary offering. So your quantity of shares outstanding would go up in that case.
So if you picture this bunch of shares in this grid right here, each of these shares has a certain value in terms of its size. We'll just say size is value here. So if you want to split your shares and you want to increase this number of shares, then you have to take the value of these and you have to cut those in half. Isn't that right? So you'd have twice as many shares at half the value. So you don't lose any total value. You double your shares, cause half the value. But again, you're going to wind up with this fixed number of shares, and that's it. Unless you do a split or do a secondary offering to offer even more shares for, whatever reason, It's a fixed number. Now, here's what's interesting. An option, basically, remember, how about this? If you're Geico and you want to create an insurance contract and you want to get another customer, see, here's the problem with the market is what Corey's saying is if you have a buyer, okay, and you have a seller, okay, a seller has to own some of these shares or borrow them from the bank to sell them. He's either got to own them or he's got to borrow them from the brokerage if he's going to short one or the other. You know, if he wants to go short, he's either got his own shares or he's borrowed some shares to sell to this buyer, one or the other. And the shares have to be in existence. They have to be in his possession, either by purchase or by borrowing. He's got to have those shares in his hand or her hand, okay? Well, in insurance, if we have a buyer and he wants to buy an insurance contract, okay, which is really a promise. He wants to buy a promise from someone. Does that insurance contract have to exist for Geico to sell him an insurance contract? Do they have to have it in their storeroom that they bought from somebody else? No. They can get out a piece of paper and they can actually write that contract down, or another word would be to invent it. Another word would be to create it on the fly. And there is no fixed number to the amount of contracts they could write. And so they could have as many customers as they want and just write another one and another one and another one and another one, much like the government prints money. Think about that. Much like the government, all a dollar bill is a promise. Well, this guy says, I promise. Since 1971, the dollar's just a promise. So all this guy says is, look, I promise I will fix your car if you wreck. I promise I will fix your car if you wreck. And that's all he has to do is say, I promise. And, you know, instead of just doing it, you can shake as many hands as you want, as fast as you can shake them. All a contract is a handshake that's written down. That's it. And so you go out, I go out today right now, might not be able to keep those promises, but I could go out today, go down to the local mall and say, you know, I promise you that, you know, you're going to be rich someday. I promise you that you're going to be thin someday. I promise you you're going to be, you know, shorter. I promise you you're going to be taller. I promise you you're going to find the woman of your dreams. Basically, I could pass out fortune cookies with promises as fast as I could shake hands. And if we wrote those down, if we have contracts, I might not honor them, but I can invent them as fast as I want. Is that a good way to say that, Corey?
Yeah, and in this insurance example, they have to hold some money in reserves to kind of fulfill their obligation, right? So they're required to have something to back that up. And it's the same way in the options market.
Yeah.
You have a buyer and a seller. Well, the seller of the option, some people might worry, well, what if they can't fulfill their promise? What happens? Well, it would actually fall to their brokerage because their broker should be holding X amount of capital and ensuring that they can fulfill it. And if they can't, then it falls to the broker and so forth. And this is a regulated market. Rest assured that if you buy an option, that promise will be fulfilled on the other side by the other trader or not, you know, so you don't really have to worry about those inner workings of it. But
the best, let's talk about this because we have some people who are just like doomsday people and say, look, if I can't hold it in my hand, it's no good. Well, guess what? In anarchy, that's true. And it's funny because I really do want to talk about this, Corey. I was on a cruise once with the real estate guys, and they had like Peter Schiff and, you know, great man, G. Edward Griffin, who wrote The Creature of Jekyll Island. And it kind of got into this anti-derivative, anti-paper. If you can't hold it in your hand, it's not worth anything. You better buy guns, gold, and grub, and the world's going to go to hell. And if you don't have guns, gold, and grub, and, you know, real estate is tangible, right? Real estate is tangible. And I was laughing my butt off because let's say you got 10,000 houses. Okay, great. We go to anarchy, and the government says, you know what? You don't own these houses anymore. I will not honor the deed. I go, how do you prove it's your house? This guy's living in it. Prove to me it's your house. And they'll say, well, here's the deed. I go, no, I'm the government. I don't honor that deed. And if you don't think that's true, don't you think they did that with gold? And what's eminent domain, right? And so ownership is only as good as the promise anyway, right? And the other thing that's funny is the difference between a deed and a share of stock is what? If I own a share of Coca-Cola, I can show you a tangible company. I can show you their address. We can go down to Atlanta and see their factory. I can see their inventory, their employees. I can see all the brand value that they have. What's worth more, your duplex or the name Coca-Cola? Well, I own the name Coca-Cola. I have a share of that. You think that's going away? So, the day people quit drinking Coke is the day your house, your deeds aren't going to be honored either. I'm telling you. There a guy said, hey, buy some gold. I said, how much should I buy? He goes, buy as much as you can. I go, okay, how about $5 million worth? He says, awesome. I says, here's the problem. I don't know that I really want to keep $5 million of gold in my house. Usually, Fort Knox has more security than a deadbolt. What do? Oh, we'll store it for you. Oh, you'll store it for me. Well, how do I know it's mine? Oh, we'll give you a receipt. We'll give you a piece of paper that says it's your. You see, it comes down to a handshake every time. And even if it's written down, look, what I mean by a handshake comes down to society's ability to say, look, I agree that you own this. We wrote, and all the writing it down, it says it was documented. But if we have chaos, we have chaos. So, all these guys that say, oh my gosh, paper is just paper and it's not real. It's no less real in real estate. This is a promise. It's a deed. It's a stock. It's a receipt. It's like a valet stub. Look, you park your car. You take your car. You say, here's my car. They say, okay, we promise to give it back to you. Here's a ticket that says we'll give you back your car. Essentially, a valet stub is a contract that says you own this car and we'll give it back to you, because you give it away when you hand them over the keys. The only way you get it back is if you have a valet stub, a coat check. And so this is an important thing to understand. I'm glad you brought that up, Corey, because too many people freak out and say, oh my gosh, the banks are no good and they're evil. Well, let me tell you, what happens to a bank if it stops keeping its promises? People go to a different bank. Integrity is an important part of this deal, and there is corruption in every asset class. And welcome to being an entrepreneur. If you can't, take those shots, then we have to go get jobs, which we can get fired. And you say, wait a minute, you gave me a 5-year contract. Well, sorry. There you go. People say, I don't want to invest in stocks. Well, how about the policeman's pension in Detroit? The government said, you know what? We're just not going to pay you. So, there has to be a level of trust to go out and live in the world and get married and have kids. And if the trust breaks down, you go from what's called social to primal. And we found as a human race that the more civilized we become, the less slaves we own, the more we treat people of different ethnic backgrounds, religions, and colors, the better off we get along. And actually, the world works best when we honor our promises. And that's actually getting better, not worse. So that's my 2 cents.
Agreed. And, in terms of the options market, we're making or getting promises for the stock, right? It's a derivative contract. So we're just simply saying, I now have the rights to this. And the seller's saying, okay, I'll make a promise. Now, let's use an example of a call option.
And this is a great word, because what's another word for make? When you make a promise. What's another word for make?
You create. Yep.
Okay. You make or create a promise.
Yeah. And so the agreement here is, it's not for free. This buyer is going to send some capital over. We want to pay the premium, but with it comes the ability to do something, the right to do something, right? And the seller saying, and think of it as a call option. Does the seller have to own the stock in order to make a promise? No, he doesn't. He can actually go out, you could become an insurance company and you can sell options without owning the underlying. However, that opens up risk in that if the price moves against you, you still have to go out and get the underlying to fulfill your promise. And it might cost you more than what you had planned for, but they can make those promises. And so the broker, just like the insurance policy, the broker would require the option seller to hold some money in reserves to make sure that they can fulfill their promise. And if this trade is going against them, this is your margin, they'll raise your margin. They'll say you need more money to back this trade up because it's requiring more capital and so forth. And so you have this dynamic where buyers are saying, I'm willing to pay premium for the rights that it gives me. And sellers are saying, I want to collect this premium and I'll fulfill the obligations. The market maker in the middle, his job is just simply to make a fair and orderly market. And the good news is, if you're trading what we call really liquid assets, that means it's easy to get into and out of them. If you're trading things that are active, then you're most likely trading against other individuals and not against the market maker. What I mean by that is, the market maker guarantees some level of liquidity, but he might put his buys and his sell orders, and he can have orders on both sides. He might put them out there pretty wide. He might say, well, I'm willing to buy this option at $5 and I'm willing to sell it for $6, right? And he might put it out there kind of wide. If you have a liquid option, if you're trading options on the S&P and the NASDAQ and big name stocks, Coca-Cola, for example, and Apple and Google and IBM and so on, then there's going to be a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers, institutions, individuals. The options market has continually grown year after year after year as people have figured out how good these are.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point. That's a good point because after doing it, you think, why would you ever get in a stock without being able to buy a put to protect it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so as knowledge and technology has grown, it's created more out there. And so when I think of liquidity, I think it's one of the most important things that a newer trader makes a mistake of. They don't pay attention to how active and how liquid the option is. And I'm a big proponent of trade the most liquid things out there. If in doubt, then don't trade it and find something better. Find something more liquid. So I'm talking S&P 100, NASDAQ 100 types of names. The big names in the market, they're going to have the biggest liquidity. They're going to have the most volume and so on. And so those buyers and sellers are really close together. It's just like any other asset class. The more attention, the more active it is, the easier it is to buy and sell. So when you think about a big market, let's use a real estate example. Buyers and sellers in Manhattan are going to have more potential buyers and more potential sellers, right? The cost might be high. That doesn't matter. What I care about is, are there a lot of potential buyers and a lot of potential sellers? Because that means that I can buy and sell real estate efficiently and effectively. If I'm, trying to sell my property in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota or something, how many buyers and sellers are there for this property? I might have 2 potential buyers that see it in a long period of time, and so that's the problem with illiquid names, with illiquid stocks. So this brings us to what we call the bid and the ask. Bid is the buyer, ask is the seller. The bid is how much I'm willing to pay for it. The ask is how much I'm willing to sell it for. And that will always be posted. You'll get what's called the NBBO, National Best Bid and Offer. So you will see on your screen the highest bidder and the lowest selling price. And that's basically where trades are going through. That's where the negotiation is taking place. And that's essentially, if you want into the trade right now, you're going to buy at the ask. And if you want out of your option right now or to sell the option right now, you're going to sell at the bid.
Now this is
buy at the ask, sell at the bid.
Now this is what's funny. Now watch this. So these guys have to pay what they're asking. Isn't that right? So these guys, if they want to get in right now, have to pay what they're asking. So if they want in right now, they have to pay $6.30 because, someone over here says, hey, I want to buy the stock. And the market maker says, well, these guys are asking $6.30. And what's funny is that money actually, goes to him, goes here. And these guys are saying, hey, I really want to sell it. And the market maker looks down from his perch and says, well, these people over here are only bidding $6.20. So they actually are going to receive, okay, watch this, they're going to receive $6.20 if they want to sell right now. Well, guess where that money comes from? It comes from the market maker. So this is a funny little thing right here. Now, wait a minute. So these guys pay $6.30. They pay their asking price to him. But these guys only receive $6.20 because they receive that money from him. So does anyone see what happened right there? What happened, Corey?
Yeah, if the market maker gets filled on both sides, then he makes the difference. He gets the 10-cent profit in between.
Now watch this. If you get 10% every time you do this, 10 cents. If you were to get, 10 cents every time you could pull this off, how many transactions times the number of transactions would you want to do? How many would you want to do?
As many as you can get filled.
As much as possible, right? That's the real number, as many as possible. So he has a huge motive to create and maintain a market and to bring these guys as close together as he can, because he'd rather make less on this. He'd rather make a penny times 10 million. He'd rather make a penny times 10 million than make 10 cents 100 times. So he has a real incentive to provide liquidity and do as many transactions as possible, right?
Yeah, and the market maker is really not trying to take market risk. He's just trying to fill as many orders and get back to net zero as possible. He's trying to fill buyers and he's trying to fill sellers.
What's that? Corey, look, they're our friends. Let's just tell them how it is.
Yeah.
He's a bookie, okay? He's just a bookie. That's all he is. He's a bookie. When you go to Vegas, you have an over and an under, and you have a point spread in Vegas, for the big game. And the bookie in Vegas, he doesn't care at the sports book what the freaking spread is. It isn't like they looked at Michigan versus Ohio State and says, oh, Michigan's having an up year. They're going to beat Urban Meyer by, 7 touchdowns, and that's what we think it is. No, it's actually the bettors that are determining that point spread. Am I right, Corey?
That's right. And here's an important point. So that market maker is trying to make money like the bookie, fill buy and sell orders. The more liquid assets you trade, the less likely your order is going to be filled by a market maker, and the more likely that you're going to be filled by somebody else. Yeah. So let's say that Andy and I want to both trade in, IBM. And so the calls are going for around $5. The bid is at $5 and the ask is at $5.10. And I want to buy it, right? I really want to own this because I think that IBM's going to go higher. And Andy has the stock, and he kind of thinks the stock's going to go higher too, but he wants to sell the call and generate some additional income on his stock in the meantime. So we've got this bid-ask spread. Well, maybe the market maker in IBM, maybe he's at $5 and $5.10, right? Or other traders might be on one side or the other. But I say, you know what? I'm willing to split the bid-ask spread. I'm going to bid $5.05 for this. I'm going to go to the mark, the midpoint. And Andy's over there, and he says, I see the bid is up there at $5.05 now, and that's about where I want filled, so I'm going to sell this option. When that transaction goes through, the market maker didn't get any piece of it because I bought and Andy sold and we transacted with each other. And so you can avoid the market maker more by trading liquid assets and by trading midpoints of the bid-ask spread and by working your orders that way. You're going to avoid some of those negatives. So there is the bookie there involved, but the good news is you can cut him out if you can get filled in liquid stocks, liquid assets in the options market. So that's what we call shaving the spread.
Was I on cue with that?
Yeah, perfect.
That's called shaving the spread. Now, let's talk about how this option contract is born and how it dies and how it can be traded, the different ways they come into existence. Let's talk now about that open interest and the amount of contracts that exist and how that number changes, gets big, gets small. Before a certain period of time, the number of contracts available is 0. And after a certain period of time, the number of contracts is going to be 0. So these are going to have a day that they're created. We have the creation day. Okay. And then we have the death day. Sorry, little option, but you guys like the ghost of Christmas present. You're going to die someday. So like, baby New Year and old man last year. That's how that goes.
Yeah, so when you think about open interest, we'll go through this a little bit. First, we've talked about monthly options. So monthly options expire on the third Friday of the month, and they will always give you the front 2 months. So let's just say that we're in, for simplicity's sake, let's say we're in January.
Let's say we're in like January 2000. January 2024. That's today. Okay. So today is January 2024.
Okay. So there would be, and let's say it's before the third Friday. So let's say that it's January 10th or something like that. We haven't hit the third Friday of the month. Remember, expiration for monthly options is the third Friday of the month. So if today is January 10th, we would have a January monthly and a February monthly because they'll always give you the front 2 months. But we might not have a March. That might not even exist yet, right? They might not have created it. When we hit, it could skip. You could have a June and you could have a September and so forth. Now,
let's do that. June, September 2024. Now watch this. You might have a January 2025, and then you might even have a January 2026. This would be a very typical option chain choice where you get the front 2 or 3, then you skip a couple, and then you skip a year. And what are these called? Just for a reminder,
those everybody. Are your LEAPs, your long-term equity anticipation securities. And why do they put them in Januaries? And that's a tax reason because it moves your option all the way to the next year. So if you wanted to sell it and hold it all the way to that January, you don't have to pay any tax on that profit for a whole nother year and so on. So they create the LEAPs in January expirations out multiple years in advance. But what happens once we get, let's say the third Friday in January is the 19th or something. So we pass that expiration. Now, those January options, once they hit their expiration, they cease to exist, right? They go through the weekend. All the options are now gone. There's no January expiration. We have February is now considered to be the front monthly option. They will create a whole new contract in March because they're going to give you the front 2 months.
So this new contract must now be created to give me the front 2 months.
Yep. So they create a March option in 2024, and the expiration for all those options is the third Friday of the month. But here's my question. Have those options, if they've never existed, do they have any open interest? Meaning, has
0.
anybody bought or sold them? And the answer is no.
0.
On their birthday it's all zeros, right?
Yeah.
And so it's actually, when an option is first created, it's not really a great idea to just jump in there and start trading it, because we want open interest to build up. Open interest, we'll go through what it means, but it's basically an accrual of buyers and sellers and of contracts being created. And that's a good thing. That's a sign of liquidity. So those March are brand new.
So let's just say this, from a trading standpoint, let's say that the March just came out an hour ago and I want to buy a call. Well, I probably don't want to buy a call, in February, because my time decay hurts me. We said we wanted at least, maybe 2 months or more. I might, if I look at the open interest and the volume on that March, I might say, you know what, these Junes have been out for a while. Maybe I'll go with these Junes, right?
That's exactly right. You'd get more liquidity. Buyers and sellers, more liquidity in it. So that would be exactly right.
And that might be a thing when people say, well, you said 2 months or more. What could influence my decision between making a March, long option that's 2 months out, or a June option that's a little further out? Well, if the June option had far more liquidity at the time, hey, that might sway me to pay a little more for a little more time, thinking that I have a little bit more liquidity in the option. Is that a good way to think of that?
Exactly right. Yeah, more liquidity is always what we want in the options world. So now these March options exist, and now we can think about their birth, their transfer, and their expiration. Yeah. Right? Because once they start to trade, now you have in the options market, some brokers will specify, they'll say buy to open, sell to close, sell to open, buy to close. Some brokerages don't. They just call every option trade a buy or a sell, and you're kind of in charge of what that means yourself. But what does it mean to open, and what does it mean to close? All it simply means is that you're starting a contract that you don't already have. So I can buy to open or I can sell to open, and it's my starting point, right? So when we think about a buy to open order, that means that I don't have this. If I open up my brokerage account, I don't own this option. I don't have anything to do with it yet, but I want to buy it to open a new trade. Anytime you are opening a new trade, it is to open. And you're actually potentially creating a new contract if the person on the other side is also opening.
So let's understand this. Is often you'll hear the term sell to open. And another thing, you'll say, I want to write an option. Why would they use the term write an option instead of just sell an option? Like if you're talking with Corey and I, and we're all three, at the coffee shop, and we decide to buy you guys a cup of coffee, and we say, hey, look, what are you doing in the market right now? And you say, I'm writing options. Why wouldn't I say I just sell options, Corey? Why we hear this term writing options? I mean, they're interchangeable, of course, but why write?
Yeah, because you're selling a new contract. You didn't have it before, and you're basically creating a new contract.
When I write a book, now trading. I've written 2 or 3 books. Okay. Well, another way I could say I could say this. I've written 2 or 3 books. Andy is the writer of 2 books, or Andy is the creator of these books, or Andy is the seller of these books. All 3 are correct. I wrote the book, I created the book, and I sold the book. And all it's just synonymous. I'm doing the same thing. It refers to the same process, and I get the same amount of money. It doesn't matter which term I use. But I think it's interesting that we say, hey, we write an option or we sell to begin. It's the starting point. It's the creation point. It's the opening of this idea, right?
That's right. Go to that graphic that you have where it shows the birth and then the transfer and then because I think this is a great way to think about how open interest forms. So when you think about the options market this way, so you have to open, you have to close. Those are the two types of transactions.
Yeah.
How can an option be created? A new option is created, or new open interest is created whenever there's a buy to open and a sell to open together. So if I say, again, if I want to buy to open and you want to sell to open, we've created a new contract because neither one of us had that contract before. It was created when we placed these orders. So I bought to open and you sold to open.
This is a male nurse. This is the male nurse spouse. And they came together and they made this. You see this? So
Yep.
This is the male nurse and this is the male nurse's wife. And they came together and they made this. Let's just take that out, and now it makes better sense. The man and the woman came together and this was created. Okay, watch. A person said, I'd like to sell to open. And that's one guy.
Call it 10 contracts. Let's say 10 contracts.
Contracts. And another person says, you know what? I want to buy to open. 10 contracts. That is a match made in heaven. And voila, 10 contracts are born.
Yep. And so now it would read you have 10 contracts of open interest. Let's say these are those new March options. They don't have it. Nobody's traded them. We just created 10 contracts of open interest. But now let's go to a transfer. If I decide I bought these 10 contracts and I decide, you know what? I'm ready to get out of them. I'm ready to go and sell these contracts. Well, what am I going to do? Because I bought to open, I'm going to sell to close.
Sorry, right? I thought we were going to do the buy to close first. Okay, so I'm going to...
yeah. So I'm going to sell to close my contracts. I'm going to sell them off. But what if the person on the other side is somebody that just wants in? He says, you know what? I want to be a buyer of these calls. And so he's placing an order to buy to open, and I'm selling to close. That open interest remains at 10. And the reason is it was a transfer of ownership. We did not create a new contract. We did not close out an existing contract. Yes, I closed my side, but somebody else just simply stepped in and took my place. So open interest in that scenario remains at 10. There's not, that's still how many contracts are open in the market.
Conversely,
you sold to open.
Yeah.
Yep, and he took my place on the buy side.
And conversely, this guy that bought to open could sell to close, right? But this guy that sold to open, he could buy to close, and some other dude could sell to open, and that could be a transfer as well, right?
And open interest, when it's a transfer, when somebody's opening and the other side is closing, your open interest remains the same. Because you still have the same amount of open interest, which means open quantity of contracts in the market. But now there is a way to retire option contracts early. And that is if both traders are closing their transaction. So I already got out and I transferred it on to you. Andy, let's say, sold to open originally. Well, he says, I want to buy to close this contract. I want to close mine out. And you stepped in my place and you bought from me, but you say, you know what? I want to sell to close now. I'm ready to get out. So you place a sell to close order. Andy places a buy to close order, and you transact. What's going to happen to the 10 contracts of open interest? It's going to go to 0 because those contracts are now retired. They were closed out. So whenever both parties are closing the transaction, it reduces the open interest. When both parties are opening a new contract, it increases the open interest. If one party is opening and one party is closing, the open interest is unchanged.
So I'm going to make this a little bit clearer, and I'm into repeating. So I'd rather have people accuse me of repeating things and being repetitive than not being clear. So watch this. We're going to use green on opens. Okay, so watch this. One person wants to buy to open, and he wants to buy to open 10 contracts. The other person wants to sell to open, and now in 10 contracts. That means we have people that want to do business together. One guy wants to buy a promise, and one guy wants to sell a promise. Okay, one guy wants to buy a promise, and one guy wants to sell a promise. So we always have a buyer and a seller, and when one guy's buying and one guy's selling, money can change hands. So the buyer sent money to the seller. The buyer now has a promise. The seller now has a promise, and the open interest is at 10 contracts. Okay. If this happens again with two others, then you can go to 20 contracts, or however many are there. Okay. Now watch this. Now let's say that a person says, well, I think I bought to open. I would like to sell to close. Okay, so that's going to be red, sell to close. But you know what? There might be someone else that wants to what? Buy to what, Corey? Open.
Yeah, exactly. And they're going to take their place. So they're opening and that person's closing. You just have a transfer of ownership. You're not creating a new contract or closing it out. You're just transferring the ownership.
Yeah. The one that I bought to open here is now just being bought by this guy that's opening, and I can close my involvement in it, right? Very, very simple. Okay, now watch this. Another thing that could happen is maybe I'm this guy who sold to open, and I want to buy myself out of this and close out the contract. I want to buy to close. So the red, it's always going to be in red here. I want to buy to close. Well, you know what? What if someone else wants to get my right color here? What if someone else wants to sell to open 10 contracts? Well, notice there's not an increase of contracts. The open interest in both these cases is still 10. And that's kind of a good way to think of it. Now think of it. Here you have a buyer and a seller, but since they both want to open, we got to invent some new contracts. Here I have a buyer and a seller, so money can change hands. But since one wants to close, the other wants to open, we can just transfer the contracts. Here, a guy wants to buy the close. But in every scenario, here's the thing to catch. In every scenario, we have a buyer and a seller, a buyer and a seller, a buyer and a seller. These guys both want to get in. Okay, one guy wants to get in, one guy gets out. Just transfer. Okay, this guy wants to get out, but this guy wants to get in. Great, transfer. Okay, now over here, maybe the best way to say this here would be well, let's say that the guy who wanted to buy to open wanted to sell to close, and this guy that sold to open wanted to buy to close 10 contracts, right? Well, that's both are closing. So we get to, I'm going to erase this if I'm not careful, man. Can you believe how tedious this can be? Okay. So now the open interest,
zero open interest,
is reduced. And this is before expiration. So you can see the open interest going up and the open interest going down. Now there's what's interesting. The volume on this day is 10. And the volume right here in this contraction is 10. And the volume right here is 10, and the volume right here is 10.
Yeah, this could have all happened in the same day. That's a very interesting point. So at the end of the day, guess what?
If it all happened in the same day, the volume would be 40.
The volume would be 40. The open interest, though, would be 0.
Would be 0.
Because they opened the contract. There were
Traded
a couple
them
of
a bunch
swapping
times,
out, and then it was closed by the end of the day. So your open interest would have started to climb to 10, but ended up back at 0. And volume would have ended up at 40.
And that's a great point, because some people see that the open interest is smaller than the volume. Like, how in the heck could that possibly be? These guys are all crooks and liars. There's no way that could happen. Someone's rigging the system. No, volume is the amount of transactions that go on, and open interest is the amount of contracts in existence.
Still open.
So, for example, we have a money supply in the United States of, how many $1 trillion. But the amount of commerce that takes place every day could be, money. It might not be net. It might not be in the total GDP, but those are different numbers. The amount of money that changes hands and the amount of money that's available is different. I can have, a basketball in a game and only have one basketball, but we might have 55 passes in that, in that half of play. We might, my team hopefully have more than 50. So even though we only have one basketball, we might trade that basketball around and pass it, 100 times in a half. We get 3-4 passes for possession. You get 25 possessions in a game. That's 75 passes, one basketball. So here we created 10 basketballs, but then we passed them here, and then we passed them here, and we passed them here. 40 passes, and then we got rid of the basketballs when we said no one wants to play anymore. So if we say, hey, we got to play. Well, let's create 10 basketballs. Okay, well, I don't want to play. Well, I do. Okay, well, I'll just let you take my place in the game. Okay, well, I don't want to play more. Well, I do, so I'll let you take my place in the game. I'll sit down. You know what? I don't want to play anymore. You know what? Neither do I. Let's get rid of the basketballs. Is that a good way to think of it?
Yep, perfect. Yep,
so,
it's the quantity of contracts traded during the day is your volume, and then open interest, of course, it can increase, it can decrease. And this is kind of interesting because some traders will watch for really big option trades. What they try to get a sense of what big institutions are doing. And when you see a transaction go through, let's say that there's 5,000 contracts of the ABC 35 calls.
Yeah.
We know somebody placed a huge order. We don't know whether they opened or closed the transaction, but we can get a sense of it by watching the open interest. If the open interest drops by 5,000, we know they were closing out their trade. If the open interest increases by 5,000, we have a pretty good sense that they were opening a new transaction in that contract. So there's information there.
Not quite insider trading, but kind of the same idea, right? Activity by those in the know or who might believe something. And, the institutional money we call the smart money, that can move markets. So watching the open interest is an interesting thing. Really a well explained, I think, hopefully people caught it, is this. So let's go into theater mode here. And so we ought to finish with this, though, is once, can we bring this to the front? I don't know if I can do this. Is once, the other way they can die is by expiration date, right? Once they expire, all of them go away, and no one's going to be trading those. Everything is closed out and either closed or expired or settled. And then it's time for another set of options, and they keep rolling out and rolling out and rolling out. And at some point, maybe down in here, they roll out the next year. And they do this year to year. Corey talked about tax consequences, and this is what it can look like. And so you'll often find that these options that are put out earlier, right, these little, not quite the front one, these will have more involvement because they're older. And so when we look at an option chain, and talk about this also, please, Corey. Talk about strike prices for a little bit, and how we decide how many strike prices to make available. Why some options might not have a 50-cent strike. Some, like when you look at an options chain. This is might be a better way to do it. If we look at an options chain, okay, right here we have an options chain with $5 strikes. Okay.
Yeah, there's $5 distance.
$5 distance. Okay. Other options you will see might have $5 strikes, and all of a sudden right here they're going to $2.50 strikes. Now this used to be pretty freaking organized, where if it was like under $50, you'd get you could get $2.50 strikes, and above 50 strikes, $50 you get $5 strikes, and above $200 you get $10 strikes. It used to be pretty much across the board, but now with the demand for more expiration dates and more choices, more strikes, you can see 50-cent strikes now on stocks.
And that's a product of liquidity as well. It's basically what the market wants, the market gets. And so if there are a lot of active traders in, some of the most active assets are SPY and QQQ. Those are major market ETFs. So when you trade SPY, you get access to all 500 companies with one transaction.
It's pretty nice.
And people like that. And so when you pull up SPY and QQQ options, you're going to see strike prices at every 50-cent increment. So it might have a 300, a 300.50, a 301, and so on and so forth. When they're less liquid, then it's going to have bigger distances between the strikes, and it's also a product of your share price. So if you're a lower share price, if a stock's trading at $20 per share, regardless of how liquid it is, it's probably going to have a strike price at every dollar, because you don't want to go too far. It's just too big of a percentage jump. So a stock at 20, it might have a strike at 21, 22, and so forth.
Right.
A stock at 50 that's not all that liquid, it's not going to have one at every dollar. But a really liquid stock at 50 would have one at every dollar still. So it would be 51, 52, 53. If it's not all that liquid, it might jump to $2.50 increments, 50 and 52.50 and 55 on the strike. So it's a product of liquidity as well, how much the market likes to trade it, and the more active it is, the more strike prices it gets as a general rule.
So let's take a look at this option chain right here, and this is a great example where we see the $80 strike has 412 contracts. That's all the contracts there. But man, was it traded today. I mean, this thing changed some hands because the volume was higher than the number of contracts. So, they had 412 basketballs in the game, but they had 1,439 passes. Here they had 5,000 basketballs in the game, but no one's passing the basketball. They're that's called making the ball stick in Coach Majerus's terms. Here they're passing like crazy, okay? Here we got all kinds of basketballs and almost no passing. So this tells us how many times the transaction is made. This tells us how many contracts are in existence. Now this is a real stock with real numbers to it. And this is this is highly liquid right here. And
those liquidity figures are off the charts.
They're through the roof. They're fantastic.
Yeah, and so trading options on something like that would be, easy, no-brainer. It's fine to trade. A lot of times you'll pull up the volume and the open interest, and those numbers are going to be very light.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes a concern. So normally when I pull up open interest and volume, I'm looking I want some of the contracts to at least be trading in the hundreds. If I'm not seeing multiple strikes that have hundreds in their volume, and I want multiple strikes to have thousands in the open interest, the volume will usually be less than the open interest, because it's pretty uncommon that all the contracts would trade hands and so forth multiple times. So usually volume's going to be lower, open interest higher, but I want to see, as I look at it, I want to see some hundreds in the volume, definitely. I want to see some in the thousands, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I want to see open interest, a lot of the contracts at 1,000-ish,
For sure.
And that's not always going to be the case. You'll pull up some option chains where you'll definitely see volumes where you'll see a lot of zeros, and then all of a sudden you'll see a 10 and more zeros and a 5. And that's not a good sign of liquidity. That means nobody's really trading it. And it's pretty darn sure that if you do trade it, You're going to be trading against the market maker. It's going to be harder to get filled at a reasonable price and
which
wider
means
spreads,
your midpoint is going to be further. You're going to have to come halfway a lot further to get a midpoint.
And it's hard to get filled at the midpoint when there's just not activity in it. Yeah, so
you got the January
it has complications.
You got the January 2024s and the February 2024s. And then you got we said maybe the May 2024s and maybe the September 2024s, whatever, and then the January 2025s, okay? Now I'm going to show you something, and Corey, you just tell me something here. Now look at this one. Now that's pretty big open interest. And then look at this one. That's pretty big open interest. And then look at this one. That's pretty big open interest. And look at this one. That's pretty big open interest. So I go big, small, big, or small, big, small, big, small. What does that tell you about the evolution of this particular stock for this particular month, in that when it might have come into existence with which strikes?
Yeah, so it could be a function that maybe they created this with only the $10 strikes. So notice the open interest was higher, rounded at zeros.
On the $10.
That could be the case.
Could be.
My guess is a lot of times that all the strikes were available, but you will see more volume and open interest at what we call psychological levels.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by that is if you pull up an option, round numbers. If you pull up an option chain, and let's say that the stock is trading in the 50s, and it has a 50 strike, a 51, a 52, 53, 54, 55. Which ones are going to have the most action in them? Probably the 50 and the 55, because it just gets more interest.
50. And let me speak to this. If you go to the stock chart, okay, and if you just look at a stock chart, you'll find resistance and support on even numbers more often than odd numbers.
Yeah, whole round numbers often.
And for whatever reason that is, it's kind of like if the Dow would, like, let's say, the Dow is trying to get to, 27,000, okay? And it's bumping its head against 27,000 and because it's a psychological barrier. Boom. And next thing you know, it comes in here, and where's it going to bump its head the next time? 28,000. So there's kind of sticking points there too. And when you buy options, a lot of people are using technical analysis as well that way too. But either could have happened because you can, like, sometimes you'll be trading an iron condor and you want to switch months, and it'll say what? Not traded. So you might have a 50-cent strike at 1 month, go out the next month, and they don't have those 50-cent strikes yet, but they might come into existence later. Is that fair to say?
That is. And the psychology behind it, like you said, if a trader's targeting something, the average individual out there is not going to say, I'm going to sell my stock when it gets to 53.27.
Right.
They're going to say, I'm going to sell these shares, or I'm willing to sell at 55.
Yeah.
And so that's the call option that they're going to sell, because they're willing to sell their shares when it gets up to that level and so forth. So that's why a lot of times it accrues at those certain strikes.
So open interest is the total number of contracts, right? And volume, right? That's here, open interest. And volume is the number of contracts traded in a trading session. And notice a contract can be traded more than once. So it's really the number of transactions total that are traded as they go back and forth through the market maker. Those are the 8, man. Delta, Theta, Vega, Premium, Strike Price. Hopefully now, if you see a delta, you have a greater depth of knowledge of what that means and where it came from after our class on delta. Hopefully when you see theta, you have a greater depth of knowledge on theta after that class and after that class. You should have come to the table understanding premium and strike price in 4 pillars and expiration date. We talked a little bit about this in the review. And now, hopefully, you have a greater depth of knowledge of open interest in how things come into existence, volume, and how that comes into existence. Final look at an option chain. This is one I've just built. This actually is a real stock. I just took numbers from a real stock. Usually at the top, you'll have the underlying symbol. So this stock is trading around $150, bid and ask. The last one was down here at 153.81. So our at the money is, or in the money is 150 and above, and these are out of the money. This is, the at the money option is, kind of in this area. Often you'll see them shade in the in the money options just to distinguish them from the out of the money options. And then we have everything we need here. We have our volume or open interest, we have our Greeks, we have our bid or ask, we have our strike, we have our expiration dates, whatever it is. So that's pretty cool stuff.
It's great to see how far you've come. When you started Ultimate Options, you probably didn't have the depth of understanding on these things, and now you can pull up an option chain and what the theta means. It's how much that option decays per day. It's just really cool to see that progress.
If we were to bring up an education continuum, and we were to say, you've been in the Mentor Club, you've probably, seen some of these, maybe you know them like the back of your hand. If so, congratulations. But I think it'd be tough not to have a greater depth of knowledge of all these things you see in Mentor Club now after getting this far. So congratulations. A little summary. After an option chain is just a table that provides this information for us. Most trading software provides traders with an option chain. Most option chains have the essential features, and then, well, you know what? It's just, that's why we have a good beta test once in a while, right? I gotta put periods on stuff. Right. You can tell, it should give people hope because, this is why I wasn't a great student in school, is I just didn't see a lot of detail. Some people really go, like my wife, man, if she saw this without periods on it, and she'd go nuts, man. Me, I'm like, as long as the words are there. So, most option chains have the essential features, and then, will vary in their extras, right? All that little extra cell phone stuff we talked about. But we want those 8 at least. Open interest is the number of contracts in existence for a specific option. Volume is the number of contracts traded. That's why I have Corey to help me in the trading session. And then the open interest and volume can help us gauge the liquidity of an option. Low liquidity can increase the spread between the bid and the ask. In other words, the market maker isn't getting a lot of liquidity. Those bid and ask people can be pretty far apart. The more people you have involved, the closer it tends to come together just by numbers. So we want to trade high liquid. You gave us some numbers. We'd certainly like the volume in the hundreds. If we can get the open interest into the thousands, you've got a pretty good liquid option right there to trade. So pretty awesome. A really good lesson. Particularly, I don't think a lot of people understand that. And a lot of people don't understand why, an open interest number might be smaller than a volume number sometimes. So that's why. Right. So a great discussion. Great job for hanging out with Corey and I. And maybe we ought to do some risk graphs next. Let's do some risk graphs.
Love it.